And this is now a real moment of crisis where there is a real dichotomy between radicalism, between really extreme Islam, which turns also against moderate Islam and certainly against Western interests. So the only way to really meet all these threats is by pulling together all our resources. And in that respect, Israel has a lot of resources to offer. So there is no wonder why the US and NATO are cooperating very closely with us.
And we switch immediately to Tehran, where we'll talk to Sayed Mohammad Marandi. Welcome to our show. You are a professor at the university in Tehran and a political analyst, and you have lived in the United States. You have just heard the former ambassador to the US from Israel. What is your response to his comments tonight?
Well, I really can't take anything that comes from Israel seriously, because Israel, of course, is the only regime in the region that has hundreds of nuclear weapons, and it's unwilling to admit it. At the same time, it calls itself a democracy, yet like apartheid South Africa, it is an apartheid regime. It carpet bombs cities like Beirut and Gaza.
Could you please go into the points that the ambassador has touched on? So what I'd like to hear from you is your response to him saying that Israel is not involved in this crisis in Syria, but that they have evidence that the Syrian regime is responsible for these attacks.
Well, that's what I was alluding to, in fact. Because when a regime like Israel that has that sort of past, carpet bombing cities, and then saying that these apartment blocks were occupied by terrorists, this sort of regime could obviously fabricate tape recordings of alleged soldiers talking to one another about chemical attacks. The reality on the ground is that the Syrian government is winning on the ground across the board in the country, and there's no reason for it to use chemical weapons at a time when it's winning all the battles. Yeah. And it's obviously in the interest of the militants to use these weapons, and of course the United States and its partners encourage the usage of these weapons because they know that every time they use them, the Syrian government will be blamed by the West.
Mr. Ayalon, you have been listening in. Your response, please, to the words we have heard from Tehran.
Well, it's hard to begin because you hear such fantasies, and from a country like of the Ayatollahs, which are very brazenly stepping on any and every human rights and civil rights of the poor Iranian people, who has been spawning and supporting terror all over the world, including Hezbollah. For them to teach a lesson to the United States and to the UK and to the entire international community, it's quite absurd. In fact, Iran is the only reason that Assad can keep butchering and slaughtering his people together with Iranian forces and together with Hezbollah. So the source of all the instabilities and terrorism today in the Middle East and beyond is Iran. You have Iranian agents in Nigeria, you have them in Mali, you have them in Somalia, all over. So I think it's very important that the international community will continue the pressure on Iran, and Iran will buckle under pressure because with the political isolation that they face, with the economic sanctions and more pressure to come, I believe they will have to A, stop the terror, and B, most importantly, to stop their relentless run towards nuclear capabilities, which of course nobody in the world can afford.
What will Iran's response be when Syria is going to be attacked by the US?
Tuan, history is very important, and the people of Europe have to recognize that constant crimes committed by the United States and violations of international law and misleading the public by American and Western leaders is exactly the root of the problem in this part of the world. So whatever Iran does in response, this will alienate the United States and its European allies, not only in this region, but countries like Russia, countries like China, countries like Brazil and others will gradually move away from the West because they see these countries as constantly and repeating violations against international law and based upon deception.
You cannot tell me what Iran is going to do, so let me rephrase the question. What will be the consequences of a U.S. attack on Syria? What will happen in the region? Short answer, please.
Well, basically what the United States is doing is it's strengthening Al-Qaeda in Syria, because extremist groups that are being backed by dictatorships like Saudi Arabia and funded by Qatar, they are the ones who will benefit from this. Extremism is spreading across the board thanks to Western support and the fact that they're closing their eyes to this reality. But politically speaking, the United States and its allies are also alienating countries like China and Russia, and these countries will be, I think, moving closer to countries like Iran. So I think that in the long term, the United States is not only damaging its own credibility, but it's isolating itself across the international community.
Mr. Marandi in Tehran and Mr. Danny Ayalon. Gentlemen, thank you both for being on our show tonight. Thank you very much.